So, guys, I want to talk about AEW, and I'm actually going to go down to St. Louis and go to Wrestle Dream. So, there are a couple of concerns that I do have about Wrestle Dream, and one of them is talking about Okada and Takeshita and their tag team match with Brody King and also Bandito. And I think for a lot of good reasons, Okada and Takeshita should become the tag team champions. And I want to talk about why. That the first thing is subversion of expectation, and that ultimately translates to unpredictability. Like a lot of people think that they're going to fight and they're going to have a big problem and they're not going to win the tag team titles. And and a lot of people think that's going to happen, but it's almost like that thing too with professional wrestling, which is ultimately it's when you do it and it's how you do it. And sometimes a good thing that can happen is that you just pick the right moments. Because one bad thing about AEW is that sometimes, and they've done a good job with this in the past, like with MJF being part of Chris Jericho's faction, and then they eventually had a match, is that they just did a slow burn, and that's what you got to do sometimes. Like you can do Okada and Takeshita, but you can say something like, "Hey, you know what? Wouldn't it be better if they were the tag team champions, and then maybe they feuded at, and maybe their feud started at World's End for the Continental Classic Championship." Or what if, the whole story was, respect, or Okada saying, you know what, you don't have it yet, and they were still tag team champions. They have a match at World's End, really, and then, they just shake hands and they're cool, really. Then you do at Full Gear. That's when they and then at Revolution next year, that's kind of when they start their feud, and then they have their blow off match, maybe like an hour long match at Wembley Stadium or something like that. Like slow burns are always really, really good. So you get the tag team titles, it prevents that, and you can have some dream matches because they're both really great wrestlers. And then also, Takeshita is the IWGP champion right now. So maybe you want to say something like, okay, you could be a tag team champion for a couple of months. So that way it's not as physical of a workload. There's stuff to do with that. So that's also one of the big things too, is just to say, hey, the fans won't expect it, but we can tell a longer story of Takeshita and Okada working together before the family, then eventually they break apart, really, not just automatically jump to it. Another big issue is Bandito. That Bandito got an injury, so it's almost like saying, wouldn't it make sense for him not to have a championship, not to work injured? And you could even do something, and I disagree with this, but Brody King can turn heel and take out Bandito for costing him the match. Or you can say something like, well, at Final Battle, it's Brody King versus Bandito, either as babyface versus babyface or heel versus babyface. Because, you can be like, okay, well, Bandito loses. And then Brody King's like, you know what, you're not believing in yourself anymore. You're kind of like the wrestler of the year. This is all the stuff you've been doing, really. And since you don't have that confidence, I'm just going to take things from you. I'm to motivate you. I'm going to make you start having some balls, really. And that could lead to something, because I think that Brody King's at the point where he could be the Ring of Honor champion, and he's done so much for AEW, really. And as I said, he gets discriminated against, because we all know that in AEW, if you're a big man, if you have muscles, they don't push you that well, really, because, again, if you have Brody King as the AEW champion, or Powerhouse Hobbs, or Samoa Joe, or other, like, bigger people, then who's going to really beat you? Because it doesn't make sense for Hangman Adam Page or a smaller person to kind of take you out, really. That's kind of why they don't push those. But you can kind of, just revise that by starting with Brody King and Bandito losing their tag team titles. You have Bandito heel because of an injury. Then you give the Ring of Honor World Championship to Brody King. You have some matches with that, and then he also does double duty, really. In AEW, he goes after some singles titles, and that's also a good thing because they don't have a lot of singles. They don't have a lot of babyface single stars in AEW right now. Like, everybody's either part of a faction or they're just part of a tag team. Like, you had Eddie Kingston, but he's in the he's with Hook now, and then you also had Mark Briscoe, but he's part of the conglomeration. There's nobody else on that roster that I can think of is a male single star. You had Anthony Bowens, but they fucked it up with him. He's going to go back to the Acclaimed. But then you have Brody King fill in that gap a little bit because you need single male stars. I mean, you can't have people who are part of factions and groups because that's usually for triple and tag team matches. I also think that the other part of it is the dream matches because you can honestly do Jurassic Express versus Okada and Takeshita. You can obviously do Ospreay and Swerve if they ever come back, or you can do something like LFI, like Sammy Guevara and Rouge. You could do the Hurt Syndicate, Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin versus Takeshita and Okada. And also too, you can even do like Hook and Eddie Kingston versus Okada and Takeshita. You can do the Acclaimed because Anthony Bowens had his best match ever. That would actually be a really great match, And then because the diss rap that happened last year, they can do stuff. So I mean, there's so many dream matches that you can do with this. But I think with Brody King and Bandito, you don't really have that many dream matches. You just have Bandito who can work well in the match, really, but there's no story with him. He's just a guy who dresses up like Zorro. That's the only thing that appeals to him, and hey, he has great matches. But the whole story that you get with and that's the other part, that you get a story with Takeshita and Okada, because really Okada doesn't respect Takeshita really, and then you just have to add layers to it, and the layers could be Okada thinks that maybe he's better than the group really. He thinks that his shit don't stink. Maybe he's older and he's afraid of Takeshita, and he thinks Takeshita can go further and have a better career than him. You can do something like maybe Okada's like a privileged boy, and a lot of people say about Okada that he doesn't work as hard as he should. So he thinks that he doesn't like Takeshita because maybe he's like, oh well, this young guy's gonna force me to work, harder than I want to really, because I worked at many jobs, and there are many jobs that don't like younger guys really, because I worked at many jobs, and I told you I used to work for Southern Connecticut State University. I remember having meetings with my boss, and one of the meetings were that I work way too hard. You have to slow down your work rate because you make everybody else look bad. So that does happen in the workplace, that some people are like, you work too hard, you need to stop working as hard as you want to. So those things do happen really. So Okada can be like, I do not like Takeshita because he makes me look bad, because now I got to do all this extra stuff, or you're trying to outshine me, or like it looks like you're going to have greener pastures, and I don't want you to have that because then it makes me look like, an afterthought. That there could be thoughts in that, or there could be that thing about maybe it's tough love, and maybe Okada's like, what, you have it, but you don't have it, because there's a lot of people who do that, And then maybe Takeshita's almost like, maybe there's a certain point where you can show him and his wife, and he's like, what, his wife like says, what, I want to start a family, I want to be a mom, and she's almost like, saying something like, well, you really have to think about who you are really, and she's almost like, in a way, she's probably really trying to tell Takeshita, you're part of a family of people that go around hurting people, that have egos, that's just not good if we want to have a family really, or they can, I think they have a dog really, so some people, fur baby as they call it nowadays, but she can also kind of encourage him to be like, hey, what, this is not for you, you are a good person and they're not good people, so you can kind of play that angle as well really, to get something out of it, so there's a lot of things that you can definitely do with this. But I think that starts with Wrestle Dream, because like not a lot of people will expect it. And then the other thing too that helps out is that Okada this will make Okada a 4-time champion, because he has 4 belts. So you can do something like you can kind of put the tag team titles on him. It pisses people off, and then you kind of say, okay, we got to get to a point where we take off titles, we retire titles, because I think with Okada, we had to do that with him. He's been the Continental Champion for a long time. Takeshita and Okada getting all the way to Wrestle Dream, and then Takeshita taking off that title from him would be good. And then now he has the Unified and the Intercontinental title, the International title. eventually you can have a series of matches, and then you take that title off of them, the unified title, and then he just has the international title, and then you solve a problem really, because you can't just have a lot of just a person with way too many belts and not defending it really. I think the Continental title he's had for like 500 days, but it's a tournament title, just like the Owen Hart tournament title, like Mercedes, like that's not a tournament title. The Crown Jewel's not a tournament title. I mean, a tournament title is never a good idea. That just means you hold a championship from tournament to tournament. Like it'll be just like it'll be if Cody Rhodes had the Royal Rumble championship and he held it for over he held it for like 2 years because of him winning back to back, or he did that with Austin. He held it back to back for some reason really. So that's what I mean by Continental Classic. That should not be a tournament title, because tournament, it makes no sense for it to be just defended once a year, really, because you're going to have a year-long reigns or multiple year-long reigns that with some rarely defended. And then also the other thing too is you look at Mercedes. She's trying to celebrate the Owen Hart championship as a championship when it's not a championship. It's a trophy. It's something that you get for winning a tournament. It's not something with a reign. I would say that's the same with the Crown Jewel championships for the men's and the women's. It's a trophy. It's a trophy because Stephanie McMahon is not going to be defending it on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown for the longest time, really. So they have to kind of fix that. So that's what I gotta say about all that stuff. I think it does a lot more good to put it on Okada and Takeshita. People won't expect it. People wonder how they'll book it, but there are stories there. And with Bandito and Brodito, there's really no story outside of the Dave Meltzer matches, really. So I think for a lot of great reasons, Okada and Takeshita should become the tag team champions.